All right, here we are in the last part of One Man's Faith today as we're looking at the spirit of faith walks by faith. Now, we're looking at the story in Luke, this is Luke chapter 5, about Jesus getting into the boat. He got into Simon's boat, went out a little bit, he spoke to the people, and then he said to Peter, go out a little further and drop your nets, plural. And Peter says, hey, I'm tired. We've been out all night. I'll drop one net. And when he did, he got such a multitude of fish, it says that their net began to break. Now, you know, this may sound like a great miracle, but to these fishermen, this was a disaster. Their net was breaking. It was coming apart. They'd have to fix it. And in breaking, that means they were losing the fish. You see, partial faith can be a disaster. Jesus said to him, throw out your nets, plural. And they took one net and threw it out. And now there's a parallel passage. So grasp hold of this. Jesus says, throw out your nets. They threw out a net, gobblefish, net breaking. Okay? And John chapter 21, after Jesus' resurrection. In verse 4 it says, and when the day was now breaking, Jesus stood on the beach, yet the disciples did not know it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, hey, did you catch any fish? And they said, no. And he said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find fish. Here they are in a boat. They've been fishing on obviously the left side. And Jesus says, no, cast it on the right side. Listen, there's not much difference there. You know, what if they had said, oh, let's just move the boat further over to the left so we can throw it down on the right side? It wouldn't have happened. And it says, so they've been out all night now. Here's another, you know, this is kind of parallel to what's happened in Luke 5. Jesus is standing there. He says, hey, have you caught anything? They said, no. He said, okay, throw your net to the right. And so it says, they cast, and then they were not able to haul it in because of the great number of fish. One net, humongous number. Now notice, it doesn't say, and the net began to break. As a matter of fact, in verse 11, it says, and although there were so many fish, the net was not torn. Now, why would John put that in there? Why would he say, and the net didn't tear? It was to go back to that previous example of where they didn't totally obey and the nets broke. Even though the miracle happened, the nets broke. In this case, it says, and the net didn't break. As a matter of fact, I think in this one, it says there were like 138 fish. There must have been big fish. But the net didn't break. Their lives had changed from Luke 5 to John 21. They were out fishing all night, but they made a change. They had the net on the left side. Jesus said, no, put it on the right side. And moving from one side to the other, moved them from no fish to a gob of fish, from no supply to full supply, because they obeyed what he said. They walked by faith. It wasn't just believing, okay, yeah, but see, they didn't even know it was Jesus. It wasn't just believing, it was actual doing it. Okay, hey, we'll do it. Kind of like what they did in Luke 5. But instead of saying, okay, hey, we've been out all night, but because you said so, we'll do it, and only did it partially, instead of taking all their nets and throwing them out, they only threw out one net, it broke. In this case, they're saying, hey, we've been out all night, We have not caught anything, but because you've said so, we'll throw the net out. And when they threw it out, they got the fish, and the net did not break. It held for all. The provision that Jesus and God provided was not only just the fish, but the provision of the net not breaking. You see, we can walk in partial faith and we can see a miracle, but we're not going to get the full effect of the act of doing if we only do it partially. Matter of fact, we may walk away with nothing. We may get what we were told we'd get, but it may not affect us. It may not come back to us and give that full reward, that full feeling of accomplishment, if we only do it partially. In this case, they did exactly what Jesus said, and they brought back a humongous number of fish. Hebrews 10 says this in verse 35 and 36, "Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised." When you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. When do we receive what was promised? When we do. Not just when we say. The saying leads to setting us up for the act of faith that will accomplish and produce the power of God for that instant, for that moment, for whatever it is we are working in. By doing, by speaking it out and doing it. Hebrews 11. We know, it starts with, and faith is the evidence of things hoped for. Faith is conviction of things not seen, the evidence of things hoped for. He goes down in verse 6 and says, without faith, it is impossible. Without faith, it is impossible to please Him. For he who comes to God must believe that He is, and that He is the rewarder of those who seek Him. When do we get the reward? When we do. Okay? And right after that, it says, by faith Noah prepared an ark. God said, Noah, I'm disgusted with man. I'm going to save mankind through you and your family. I want you to build an ark. An ark is nothing but a big box. He says, I want you to build this big box. He gave him the dimensions. It's going to be 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 50 feet tall, and you're going to put every animal in there by two. You're going to make it out of wood, and then you're going to put pitch on the inside and the outside so it becomes floatable. And it says, Noah said, and by faith Noah, being warned by God, prepared an ark. He did something. He didn't just say, oh God, that sounds interesting, but what's an ark? Where do I start? I don't even know what it is. How do I build it? He didn't argue, he didn't say anything. He said, okay, God, I'll start to build the ark. By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed. God came to Abraham and said, I want you to leave this land, and I want you to go to the land of Canaan. There were no ifs, ands, or buts. Abraham said, okay, guide me. And he went. It says that he lived as an alien in the land of promise, in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob. Faith sometimes is not just doing, sometimes it's waiting. It's waiting. It's waiting for God. In this case, it says God told him to go out, but then he sat, he dwelt, and he was looking for a city. So he waited on God. Sometimes we have to hear, be still and know that I am God. Sometimes we have to hear that. Another passage in Isaiah says, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. The promise comes, but sometimes we have to wait. How do we know the difference? By hearing God. In Genesis 26, Isaac, there was a famine. Isaac wanted to go to Egypt. God said, no, don't go to Egypt. I want you to go where I tell you to go. So he went. He lived in Gerar. And during this famine, it says in Genesis 26:12, and Noah sowed in the land and reaped in the same year. All right, during a famine, he wasn't looking by sight. He was looking by what God had said. He said, I'm sojourn in the land, and I will be with you and bless you, okay? That's what God told him, and so he did. And it says that he reaped 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him, and the man, Isaac, became rich, continued to grow richer until he became very wealthy, for he had possessions of flocks and herds and great households, and the Philistines envied him because he obeyed God. Learning to walk by faith. Friends, I hope you hear what we've been talking about this time, during this series. Faith, faith, faith. We've got to be different than we ever have been in the past. We have got to walk more by faith than by sight. God bless you. Have a great week. I'll see you next time.